It was just after sunrise when General Amara Lewis stepped out of the black SUV and walked toward the small city cafe for her morning tea. She looked like an ordinary woman in a navy sweatshirt, black joggers, and simple running shoes. No military uniform. No badges, no visible rank, and that was exactly how she preferred to move when she was off duty. Amara was one of the highest-ranking black female generals in the United States. She had led missions overseas, overseen disaster response operations, and briefed presidents in the Situation Room, but today, she only wanted a quiet morning before a meeting at the Pentagon. Inside the cafe, customers greeted her warmly. She was polite, quiet, and respectful. No one knew she had 3 stars on her shoulder when she wore her uniform. No one knew she commanded over 18,000 active-duty personnel. Across the street, 2 police officers sat in their patrol car finishing paperwork. Officer Trent, the younger one, watched Amara enter the cafe and frowned. She looked suspicious. He muttered. His partner, Officer Barnes, barely looked up. Suspicious for what? Barnes asked lazily. Trent shrugged. I don't know. But she gives off a vibe. Barnes sighed, because he knew what that meant. The truth was simple. They saw a black woman in an expensive SUV and assumed trouble. 10 minutes later, when Amara walked out with her tea, the officers stepped out of their cruiser. Ma'am. Stop right there, Officer Trent commanded sharply. Amara paused, confused but calm. Is there a problem, officer? She asked. ID. Trent snapped, and don't reach for anything too fast. Customers at the cafe doorway watched, whispering. They had seen these officers harass people before. Amara kept her voice steady. Officer, may I ask the reason for this stop? You match the description of a car thief, Trent said confidently, even though he had made up the accusation on the spot. Amara lifted an eyebrow. A car thief driving her own government-issued SUV. But before she finished speaking, Trent grabbed her wrist. Barnes took the teacup from her hand and tossed it aside. You were resisting, Trent barked, though she was not resisting at all. Within seconds, they had her against the hood of their cruiser. Civilians gasped. One woman began filming on her phone. A man shouted, She didn't do anything, but Trent didn't care. He shoved the general roughly and pulled out handcuffs. Amara did not fight. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She only said one sentence quietly. I advise you to stop this now. Trent laughed. And I advise you to stay silent unless you want more charges. They cuffed her and placed her in the back seat of the cruiser. Outside, people were yelling at them to stop. Barnes radioed in, requesting transport for a female suspect. He used the same cold tone he used for actual criminals inside the cruiser. Amara sat still, breathing slowly. She had dealt with enemy commanders, military crises, and national emergencies. But this moment cut deeper than any battlefield wound. They didn't see her as a woman with 27 years of service. They didn't see her as a general who had defended them. They only saw her skin color. They only saw their own bias. When they arrived at the station, the desk sergeant looked shocked. What's the charge? He asked, confused. Car theft. Trent answered boldly. The sergeant glanced at Amara's calm eyes and immediately sensed something was wrong. But before he could question more, Amara spoke quietly. I would like to make my phone call now. Trent smirked. Who are you going to call your boyfriend? Amara stared at him with a stillness that made even Barnes uncomfortable. No, she said softly. I'm calling the Pentagon. That moment froze the entire room. The sergeant lifted his head sharply. Barnes swallowed hard. Trent's confidence cracked for the first time. Amara continued. And after this call, every person involved will answer for their actions. The sergeant suddenly stepped forward. Uncuff her, he ordered, but it was too late. The damage was done, and the phone call she was about to make would end more than just a morning arrest. It would end careers and shake the entire department to its core. Inside the small police station, silence spread like a heavy cloud as soon as General Amara Lewis mentioned the Pentagon. Every officer in the room felt a sudden shift, like the air had turned colder. Even the desk sergeant, who had served 20 years, knew instantly that they were in deep trouble. Officer Trent tried to regain his arrogance, but his voice shook slightly. Pentagon or not, you're still under arrest, he insisted. But no one in the room backed him. Barnes took a small step away from him. Already sensing how badly things were about to go, Amara remained calm, almost too calm. She sat down at the desk, still cuffed, and repeated, "My phone call." The sergeant hesitated for only a moment before nodding. He motioned toward the phone. "You can use it," he said quietly. Trent opened his mouth to protest, but the sergeant raised a hand sharply. "Not another word," he warned. Amara leaned forward, picked up the phone, and dialed a secure number from memory. Her voice stayed steady. "This is Lieutenant General Amara Lewis." The sergeant's eyebrows shot up even higher. A 3-star general. They hadn't just arrested someone important. They had arrested someone at the highest level of military leadership on the other end of the line. A male voice answered immediately. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" "No," she said calmly. "I've been wrongfully detained by local officers." A tense silence followed. Then the man responded firmly, "I'll notify the Pentagon Chief of Staff right away." Trent's entire face drained of color. Barnes felt sweat forming at his forehead. The sergeant leaned against the counter, suddenly unable to breathe normally. Amara hung up the phone gently. "You will receive a call within minutes," she said. "And when that call comes, all you need to do is tell the truth." The room froze again. Every officer watched the clock. Each second felt longer than the last. 3 minutes later. The phone on the sergeant's desk rang sharply. Everyone jumped. The sergeant snatched it up quickly. "Central Police Station, Sergeant Miller speaking." His eyes widened almost immediately. "Yes, sir," he said, his voice trembling. "Yes, she's here. Yes, sir. I understand." He hung up slowly and looked at Amara with a mix of fear and respect. "General, they want to speak with you directly." Trent whispered, "General." Under his breath in disbelief, Barnes stared at the floor. Knowing he had just thrown away his entire career, Amara walked calmly to the sergeant's office, picked up the phone, and closed the door behind her. But through the small glass window, everyone could see her posture, straight and commanding. She spoke softly but firmly. "Yes, I'm safe. Yes, the officers involved are present. No, they did not follow any lawful procedures. Yes, I want this handled through official channels." When she stepped back into the room, the entire station stood silent. Even officers who had not been involved watched nervously from their desks. Amara looked at Trent and Barnes first. "You never asked for identification," she said. "You never checked the license plates. You never asked for my name. You only saw a black woman in a nice car," Trent stuttered. "Ma'am, we thought you did not think." She cut him off. "You reacted." Barnes swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, General." Amara held his gaze for a moment. "You will be held accountable." Then the front doors of the station swung open. 4 black government SUVs pulled up outside, sirens off, but lights flashing faintly. Men and women in dark suits stepped in, wearing badges with national security seals. The room shifted into chaos the moment they arrived. The lead agent spoke loudly. "We're here under direct orders from the Pentagon." His eyes shifted to Amara. "General Lewis, we're prepared to escort you." Trent stepped forward, shaking. "Wait, this is a misunderstanding." The agent turned toward him with an icy stare. "Officer, do you understand who you arrested?" Trent opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The agent continued. "General Lewis oversees military operations on 3 continents. General Lewis has clearance levels you cannot even imagine, and you arrested her under a false charge." Every word crushed Trent's confidence further. Barnes looked like he might faint. Amara finally spoke. "I do not want anger. I do not want shouting. I want procedure." She faced the sergeant. "I will be filing an official misconduct report. The Pentagon Inspector General will open an investigation." The agent stepped beside her. "General, your vehicle is ready," as she walked out. Every officer in the station stood frozen, some out of respect, others out of fear. The door closed behind her, but the damage stayed inside. Careers were no longer just shaken. They were already cracking, and the true consequences had not even begun. The black SUVs escorted General Amara Lewis through the city streets as the morning sun climbed higher. Inside the lead vehicle, the agents kept their eyes sharp and forward. No one spoke unless necessary, but they all carried the same expression. A mix of anger and respect. Amara sat calmly in the back seat, her hands folded. She wasn't angry in the loud, outing way most people expected. Her anger was quiet, disciplined, and controlled, the kind that came from years of leadership and responsibility, the kind that made powerful people listen. When they reached the Pentagon entrance, guards stood straighter. Doors opened quickly. Every soldier and official recognized her instantly, even in casual clothes. And every one of them knew something serious had happened. Inside, a senior security officer walked alongside her. "Ma'am, the Chief of Staff is waiting for you in the secure briefing room." Amara nodded. "Good," she replied as she entered the room. High-ranking officials rose from their seats. Generals, colonels, intelligence directors, and advisors, all waiting for her. All aware of the incident, the Chief of Staff, a four-star general with decades of service, stepped forward. "Amara," he said in a serious voice. "I'm so sorry this happened." Amara gave a small nod. "This wasn't just disrespect," she said calmly. "This was profiling, abuse of authority." In a complete failure of procedure, she placed both hands on the table. Leaning slightly, "And if this can happen to someone with my rank, imagine how often it happens to everyday citizens." The room went silent. No one could argue with her words. The Chief of Staff folded his arms. "The Inspector General has already been notified," he said. "Misconduct reports are being prepared. And federal oversight will begin by the end of the day," but Amara wasn't done. "I want a full investigation into that precinct," she said firmly. "I want every complaint reviewed. I want every recorded incident checked for bias or abuse." Another general spoke. "That may take time," Amara shook her head. "No," she said sharply. "It needs to start now." They all exchanged glances because they knew she wasn't asking. She was giving an order, even though she wasn't in uniform. Her authority filled the room. One intelligence officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, the footage from the cafe and the arrest has already gone viral." Amara blinked slowly. "Viral, yes," the officer said. "The woman recording posted it online." He slid a tablet across the table. Amara watched the video silently. She saw herself walking out of the cafe, calm and polite. She saw the officers approach her aggressively. She saw Trent grab her without cause. She heard him accuse her of resisting. She saw her own quiet warning. And she saw the officers push her against the cruiser. A deep exhale left the room. Even people who had known her for years shook their heads in disbelief. The Chief of Staff said softly, "This isn't just misconduct. This is a national disgrace." Amara set the tablet down gently. "I don't care about revenge," she said. "I care about accountability, and I care about the message this sends to the country." One advisor leaned forward. "What message do you want to send, General?" Amara met his eyes. "That no one, not even someone in uniform, should be treated this way because of the color of their skin." There was no movement. Everyone sat still, absorbing her words. Her calm voice hit harder than shouting ever could. Finally, the Chief of Staff spoke again. "The officers involved will be suspended by noon. Their badges, weapons, and authority will be stripped until the investigation is over. And the department will face federal review." Amara nodded once. "And I want a meeting with the mayor. We need to discuss training, reform, and consequences." "It's being arranged," the Chief of Staff answered. City Hall already reached out after seeing the video. Amara's jaw tightened. She wasn't doing this for glory. She wasn't doing it for headlines. She was doing it for every black woman, every black man, every person who had ever been humiliated the way she was. After the meeting, she stepped out into the Pentagon corridor. A young lieutenant stood nervously near the door. "Ma'am, your driver is ready," he said. She nodded, but before leaving, she stopped and looked at him. "Lieutenant," she said, "never let fear stop you from standing up for what's right." The young man nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am," as Amara walked toward the exit. Agents followed, but her thoughts were already far ahead. She knew this was only the beginning. The arrest had sparked something bigger. Something the officers hadn't expected. Something unstoppable and far away in the small police station. Trent and Barnes were just beginning to feel the consequences closing in, back at the small police station. The atmosphere was no longer tense. It was collapsing. Whispers filled every corner as officers gathered in groups, nervously watching the front doors. No one wanted to be anywhere near Trent or Barnes. They stood alone at their desks, like two men waiting for a storm they could not escape. Sergeant Miller paced back and forth. He kept running his hand through his hair. He had seen officers lose their jobs before, but this time felt different. This time the entire department was trembling. Barnes broke the silence first. "Trent." "What do we do?" he whispered. Trent didn't answer. His hands shook, his face was pale. He replayed the arrest in his mind over and over. Each time made him feel sicker. Finally, he spoke. We say it was a misunderstanding, but even he didn't believe the words at that moment. The station doors flew open again. This time, 4 officials from Internal Affairs stepped inside wearing dark suits and carrying briefcases. Not local officials, state-level Internal Affairs. The kind that didn't show up unless something massive had happened. Every officer froze in place. Sergeant Miller swallowed hard. "Gentlemen," he said nervously, "can I help you?" One of them stepped forward and flashed a badge. "We're here regarding the wrongful arrest of Lieutenant General Amara Lewis." A wave of panic rolled through the station. Officers who had been trying to look busy suddenly stared at their screens harder. Others pretended to rearrange paperwork. The lead investigator pointed at Trent and Barnes. "You two, step forward." Trent's legs felt like sand. Barnes nearly tripped as he moved. They both stood in front of the investigators like schoolboys about to be punished. The lead investigator opened a file. "Do you understand who you detained this morning?" Trent nodded shakily. "Yes, sir." "I mean, we do now." The investigator leaned in, "And yet, you accused her of car theft." "Yes, sir." "And you claimed she resisted arrest." "Yes, sir." Then the investigator asked the question they dreaded. "Why did you approach her in the first place?" Trent froze. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Barnes stared at the floor. The investigator tapped his pen impatiently. "We're waiting," Trent finally muttered. She looked suspicious." The investigator snapped the file closed. "You had no probable cause, no lawful reason, no proper procedure." Every word hit like a hammer. Other officers looked away, unable to watch the destruction. The second investigator stepped forward, effective immediately. "You are both suspended." Trent's eyes widened. "Suspended? That's only the beginning," the investigator replied coldly. "Your badges and weapons?" Barnes handed over his badge with trembling fingers. Trent hesitated, but the investigator repeated firmly. "Your weapon." Trent slowly unholstered his gun and placed it on the desk. The sound of metal touching wood echoed through the entire station. Sergeant Miller closed his eyes tightly. This was the moment the department's reputation shattered. But Internal Affairs wasn't done. "Sergeant Miller," the lead investigator said. The sergeant straightened. "Yes, sir. There will be a full audit of every arrest made by these 2 officers. And a review of your department's training protocols." The sergeant nodded slowly. He knew this situation was far beyond his control now. At that moment, another officer ran inside from the parking lot. Breathing heavily. "Chief's coming," he whispered loudly. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. The police chief was known for being strict, fair, and unforgiving when it came to misconduct. Moments later, the chief stepped inside. A tall man with gray hair, sharp eyes, and a presence that made the loudest rooms go silent. He scanned the station and focused immediately on Trent and Barnes. "You two have disgraced this department," he said quietly. But quiet from him was worse than yelling. "We received calls from the mayor, the governor. In Washington," he stared directly at Trent. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" Trent looked like he might collapse. Barnes wiped his face with his sleeve. Tears forming at the corners of his eyes, the chief turned to Internal Affairs. "They are fully under your authority. Do what you need to do," as the investigators led Trent and Barnes away. The entire station watched silently, some with pity, many with disappointment. A few with anger, but no one defended them. No one said a word, because everyone knew the truth. This wasn't just about arresting a general. This was about using power the wrong way, about bias, about arrogance, about the moment poor decisions destroyed entire careers and far away in the Pentagon. General Amara Lewis prepared for the meeting with the mayor. Her mission was only getting bigger, and the wave of consequences was just beginning to rise. By early afternoon, the entire city had heard the news. The video of General Amara Lewis being wrongfully arrested had exploded across social media. People watched in disbelief as two officers shoved a calm woman against a police cruiser. No one knew she was a three-star general at first. But once her identity leaked, everything changed. Local reporters flooded the streets. News vans lined up outside the police station. Every channel repeated the same headline: Black female general wrongfully arrested, Pentagon responds, inside City Hall. The mayor sat behind his desk with his head in his hands. He was a man who valued public image more than anything, and today, that image was burning down. His chief of staff rushed into the room. "Sir, General Lewis is on her way," she said. Breathless, the mayor stood up immediately. "I need statements," he said. "I need plans." You need to apologize," the chief of staff cut in. Because the whole country is watching, the mayor swallowed hard. He knew she was right. Minutes later, a line of black SUVs pulled up outside City Hall. Crowds gathered, shouting, filming, calling out her name. Some held signs saying justice. Others simply watched in awe. When the doors opened and General Amara Lewis stepped out, the crowd fell into a hush, even without her uniform. She carried power in every step. Her presence alone demanded respect inside the building. City officials scrambled into position. Security guards straightened up. Assistants lined the hallways nervously. The mayor walked out to greet her. Sweating slightly, "General Lewis," he said. Forcing a smile, "Thank you for coming." Amara nodded politely. "Mayor Caldwell," she replied. Her tone was calm, but the firm edge underneath it made him shift uncomfortably. They entered the conference room where cameras were prohibited. Only senior officials were allowed inside. The mayor began. "General, let me start by saying how deeply sorry we are for the treatment you experienced this morning. It is unacceptable, it is embarrassing, and it does not reflect the values of our city." Amara listened without expression when he finished. She spoke with quiet authority. "Mr. Mayor, this was not a mistake. This was a pattern, a symptom of a deeper problem." The mayor opened his mouth to respond, but she continued. "Your officers did not see a citizen. They did not see a human being. They only saw a stereotype." The room went still. No one could argue. Amara folded her hands on the table. "What happened to me is what happens to others every day. But they don't have the rank or the power to fight back." Her voice remained steady. "But I do." The mayor sat up straighter. "What do you want us to do?" he asked. "Reform," she said bluntly. "Real, measurable reform. You will create mandatory training on racial bias. You will review every complaint filed in the past 5 years. You will discipline any officer found to have abused their authority. And you will make all of this public." The mayor's mouth dropped slightly. That's a lot. It's necessary," she replied. His chief of staff leaned close and whispered, "Sir, the public is demanding action. The Pentagon is watching, and the governor already called." The mayor nodded weakly. "All right," he said. "We'll begin immediately." But Amara wasn't finished. "And I will personally oversee the process." Several officials gasped quietly. "But General," the mayor said carefully, "this is a civilian matter. It became a national security matter when your officers unlawfully detained a senior military leader," she said sharply. "And it became a human rights matter the moment they profiled me." Everyone fell silent. Even the air felt heavier after a long pause. The mayor lowered his head. "We accept your oversight," he said. "We don't have a choice." Amara stood. "I'm not here to punish the entire department. I'm here to fix it." The mayor nodded quickly. "And we are grateful," he said, though his voice was shaky. As General Lewis exited City Hall, reporters swarmed the steps. Microphones flashing. "General, do you plan to sue, General? What will happen to the officers, General? Are you seeking justice?" She stopped and looked out at the cameras. Her calm voice carried across the crowd. "I am seeking accountability," she said. "And accountability begins today." The crowd erupted in applause. Her words spread across every news channel before she even reached her SUV, for the first time since that morning. Amara allowed herself a deep breath. She knew the road ahead would be long, challenging and full of resistance, but she also knew one thing with absolute certainty. The system that failed her was about to face its reckoning, and she was going to lead that reckoning herself. While the mayor's office scrambled to fix the damage, the two officers who caused the disaster, Trent and Barnes, sat inside a small interrogation room at Internal Affairs headquarters. Neither spoke, neither moved. They sat stiffly in metal chairs, hands folded, backs sweating through their uniforms. A camera blinked red in the corner, silently recording everything. Barnes's leg bounced uncontrollably. Trent stared at the table, jaw clenched, eyes empty. He had never been this scared in his life. Not during training, not during any arrest, but today. He knew his entire career was crumbling beneath him. The door finally opened. Two Internal Affairs investigators stepped inside, followed by a stern civilian lawyer who represented the State Oversight Committee. Trent swallowed hard. Barnes straightened his shirt, even though his hands shook. "Officers," the lead investigator began, tone icy and professional. "This interview is being recorded." Trent nodded quickly. "Of course," he whispered. The lawyer placed a folder on the table and opened it. Inside were printed photos, screenshots, statements, and timestamps. "We're going to go through this moment by moment," she said. "And you will answer every question truthfully," Barnes whispered. "Yes, ma'am." Trent didn't speak. The investigator slid a screenshot across the table. It showed the exact moment Trent grabbed General Amara Lewis's wrist. "Explain this," the investigator demanded. Trent hesitated, then muttered, She wasn't cooperating." The investigator raised an eyebrow. "She was holding a cup of tea and standing still." Barnes looked at the image and closed his eyes. He knew they had no defense. The lawyer placed another photo down. This one showed Amara pinned against the police cruiser. "Explain why you escalated the situation," she demanded. She raised her voice. Trent insisted weakly. Barnes suddenly looked up in shock. "No, she didn't," he said under his breath. "Trent." "She never raised her voice." Trent glared at him. But Barnes continued. "She warned us," he said slowly. "She said to stop, and you ignored her." The investigator replied sharply. Trent finally broke. "I thought she was lying," he blurted out. "I thought she was trying to intimidate us." The investigator stared at him hard. "So your response was to use force on a woman who wasn't resisting?" Trent's voice cracked. "I didn't know she was a general." The lawyer leaned in. "That is not the issue," she said firmly. "You treated her with disrespect because of how she looked, not because of who she was." Barnes wiped his face with his palm. "Ma'am, we messed up," he whispered. "We didn't follow any procedure." The investigator nodded slowly. "That is the first honest statement we've heard from either of you." Trent looked at the camera in the corner, his voice trembling. "What's going to happen to us?" The lawyer closed the folder. "You will likely lose your positions," she said bluntly. "Your certifications may be revoked, and depending on the findings, there may be criminal charges." Barnes let out a small, broken sound. Trent lowered his head until his forehead touched the table. He felt his life collapsing in real time. The investigator stood. "We will continue tomorrow. For now, you are both suspended without pay." They walked out. Leaving the two officers alone, Trent whispered, "This is all her fault." Barnes immediately shook his head. "No, Trent," he said firmly. "This is our fault for the first time." Barnes's voice held strength. "We judged her. We treated her like a criminal. And she stayed calm the whole time we did this." Trent said nothing. His chest tightened as he realized the truth he had been running from. It wasn't the general destroying his career. It was him, meanwhile, across the city. General Amara Lewis sat in her quiet office at the Pentagon reviewing reports. Her staff brought her updates every hour. The mayor had announced the start of reforms. Internal Affairs had begun full investigations, and the governor had scheduled a meeting with her for the next morning. But something else happened too. Her inbox was filled with messages from soldiers, veterans, citizens, and activists. People thanking her for standing up, people sharing their own stories, people begging her to continue fighting for justice. Amara read each message carefully. She saw the pain in their words, the fear, the exhaustion, and the hope. She leaned back in her chair. She wasn't just fixing one incident anymore. She was carrying the voices of thousands. One of her aides stepped inside quietly. "Ma'am." The national press is requesting a statement. Amara nodded slowly. Prepare one, she replied, and make sure they understand. Understand what? General, the aide asked. Amara looked up with calm determination. That this is bigger than me, she said, and bigger than 2 officers. This is about changing a system. She turned back to her desk, and the fire inside her burned stronger than ever by the next morning. The story was no longer just a local controversy. It had become a national firestorm. News anchors spoke about it on every major channel. Talk shows replayed the footage again and again. Social media platforms were filled with the same headline: General Amara Lewis wrongfully arrested. People across the country had taken sides. Some expressed outrage at the officer's actions. Others demanded reforms to stop future incidents. Veterans voiced their anger loudly. How could they treat a general like that? They asked. If this happens to her, what chance do ordinary people have at the Pentagon? General Amara Lewis watched the coverage quietly. She wasn't someone who enjoyed attention, but she understood its power. She understood that sometimes the country needed a spark to wake it up. Her aide, Captain Rivera, knocked before entering, ma'am, she said. The governor is on his way, and the Joint Chiefs want to speak with you afterward? Amara nodded. Prepare the briefing room, she said, meanwhile at City Hall. Mayor Caldwell was drowning under pressure. He had been answering phone calls nonstop. The governor, local leaders, activists, reporters, and angry citizens demanded accountability. His approval rating had dropped overnight. No one cared about his excuses. They wanted results. When the governor arrived at the Pentagon, he carried a heavy folder and an even heavier expression. He shook Amara's hand with deep respect. General Lewis, he began. This should never have happened. Amara nodded slightly. No, it shouldn't have, she replied. They sat down in the briefing room, along with several military advisors. The governor opened the folder. We've reviewed the footage, the statements, and the department's history, he said. There were red flags long before this incident. Amara kept her voice steady. Then those flags were ignored, she said. The governor nodded gravely. We're launching a statewide review, a full investigation into police bias and misconduct, one advisor asked. Is that enough? Amara answered before the governor could. It's a start, she said. But real change requires more than statements. It requires action. The governor leaned forward. What do you suggest? He asked. Amara tapped her fingers lightly on the table. We need stronger training. We need accountability that actually leads to consequences. And we need transparency. The governor wrote everything down carefully. The tension in the room was thick. Everyone knew the stakes were high. The governor looked at her again. I want you to be part of the reform committee. Your leadership is needed, Amara paused. Then nodded. I'll serve, she said firmly. I'll make sure this doesn't fade away once the news cycle ends. Across the city, protests grew larger. People marched through the streets holding signs. Justice for Amara, reform now, stop abuse of power. Even police officers from other precincts joined the march. They carried signs too. This does not represent us. Accountability matters. But inside the small station, where everything started, a different storm was forming. Internal Affairs had returned for a second round of questioning. Officers avoided looking at the interrogation rooms. The department's reputation was shattered. Neighbors avoided talking to officers off duty. Some officers even removed their uniforms before walking home. They didn't want strangers yelling at them on the street. Sergeant Miller sat at his desk with his head down. He felt helpless. He had warned Trent before about his attitude. He had seen signs of arrogance building, but he never expected it would lead to this. As the investigation deepened, more problems were found. Complaints that were never processed, videos that were never filed, reports that looked suspiciously incomplete. The mayor's office issued a statement. The department failed its citizens, and the public agreed, back at the Pentagon. Amara was preparing for her upcoming live statement to the nation. Captain Rivera clipped a small microphone to her blazer. Ma'am, are you nervous? She asked. Amara shook her head calmly. No, she replied. I'm prepared. When the cameras went live, Amara Lewis stood at the podium with the strength of a battlefield commander. Millions watched from across the country. She took a breath and spoke. What happened to me was wrong, but what happens to countless others every day is even worse. This is not just about one arrest. This is about a system that must change. Her voice remained steady, but the emotion behind her words was powerful. She spoke not as a general, but as a black woman, as a leader, as a citizen. By the time she finished, the country was silent. Her message spread instantly. People replayed her speech over and over and far away. Trent and Barnes watched from a small room, their careers slipping away with each sentence. Barnes felt tears roll down his face. Trent stared at the screen and whispered, "What have we done?" Because now, the whole nation knew the truth. And the consequences were no longer local, they were national and unavoidable. The morning after General Amara Lewis's national address, the entire country felt different. People woke up already discussing her speech. Schools talked about it in classrooms. Offices paused meetings to rewatch clips. Even military bases held brief gatherings to reflect on her words. Her message had struck something deep, not because she was a general, but because she spoke for millions who had been ignored for far too long. At the Pentagon, Amara prepared for the final set of meetings. Her aide, Captain Rivera, walked beside her carrying a stack of documents. "Ma'am," she said, "the Senate committee has asked for your statement. They want your recommendations for national police reform." Amara nodded calmly. "I expected that," she replied, but before she could head to the briefing room, another call came in. This one was from the Department of Justice. Captain Rivera answered, then quickly handed the phone to Amara. "General Lewis," the voice said. "We are opening a federal civil rights investigation into the precinct." Amara closed her eyes for a moment, letting the news settle. "Thank you," she said. Her voice controlled but grateful. "This is necessary," across the city. Internal Affairs brought Trent and Barnes into the final review room. A long table stretched across the center. 3 senior investigators sat at one end. A city legal representative sat at the other. It felt like a courtroom without a judge. The air was heavy. The walls seemed to close in around them. Trent avoided eye contact with everyone. Barnes looked exhausted. Days of interviews and truth-forcing had crushed whatever pride he once had. The lead investigator spoke. "Officers, the review panel has finished its findings." Both men straightened slightly. "Though neither had hope left, you violated multiple procedures," the investigator said. "You used unnecessary force. You fabricated grounds for arrest. And you displayed clear bias." Trent looked down at his hands. Barnes let out a quiet exhale. The investigator continued as a result. "You are both terminated from duty effective immediately." Trent squeezed his eyes shut. Barnes nodded slowly, almost relieved that the waiting was over. But it wasn't over. The legal representative spoke next. Additionally, he said, "Your actions are under federal review. Criminal charges may follow." Those words hit Trent harder than anything else. His face crumpled. For the first time, he whispered. "I messed up," Barnes whispered back. "We both did." As they were escorted out of the building, reporters gathered outside the gates. Camera flashes blinded them. Questions were shouted. "How do you feel? Do you regret your actions? Do you want to apologize to the general?" Trent said nothing. Barnes whispered yes, under his breath. But the microphones didn't catch it. At City Hall, the mayor made an official announcement. He stood before dozens of reporters, his tone serious today. "We are implementing mandatory bias training for all officers. We are reviewing 5 years of complaints. And we are launching a new public oversight board. These changes are the direct result of General Amara Lewis's leadership." The crowd applauded, not for the mayor, but for the woman whose strength forced action. Back at the Pentagon, Amara stepped outside her office after the DOJ call. Captain Rivera approached her gently. "Ma'am." "How do you feel?" Amara paused. Thinking deeply, tired, she admitted. But proud, she walked toward a window overlooking the city. Outside, people marched peacefully, holding signs with her name. Strangers chanted for justice. Young girls held posters reading, "Be strong like General Lewis." Amara placed a hand on the glass. Not for herself, but for them. For the people who needed someone to speak. Someone to fight later that afternoon. She returned to the briefing room where dozens of officials waited. General, the chief of staff said, "Your recommendations will shape the national policy. Are you ready?" Amara nodded slowly. "All my life," she replied. "All my service has led me to this moment." She stepped to the podium. A stack of papers in front of her, but she didn't need to read them. She knew exactly what needed to be said. "The goal," she said, "is not to punish officers. The goal is to prevent abuse. The goal is fairness. The goal is respect. Not just for people in uniform, but for every person in this country." Her voice filled the room like a steady drumbeat. She was no longer speaking as the woman who had been arrested. She was speaking as the leader of change. When she finished, the room stood in silence. Then, slowly, one by one, every person rose and applauded her. Not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. As the applause echoed, Amara closed her eyes. She remembered the cafe, the tea, the moment the officers grabbed her. And she remembered the calm voice she used. The voice that started everything. She whispered to herself, "This is the justice we needed outside." The nation moved forward. Reforms began. Officers trained differently. Communities felt heard. And Amara Lewis became a symbol not of anger, but of strength, of dignity, of change. Her wrongful arrest destroyed careers, but it also rebuilt a system. And her calm voice became the spark that transformed a nation.